Morning. Today is Saturday. We are in the local vigilance area yet again. I do plan to get up to Vermont in the next few weeks, but we're not there yet. Snow up there still lingering. Down here, as you can see, not so much. It's gotten a little bit warmer. We're like on that cusp of spring where the last legs of winter kind of taunt you. We're probably not beyond the realm of possibility of one more snowfall. Hopefully not, preferably not, but, Anyway, we're going to go through here today looking for sign. Interestingly enough, I have found human footprints denting into the leaf litter. So if you look really carefully, you might actually find something. Beyond that, not really much of an agenda because I didn't really know what the weather was going to do today. So kind of doing this one a little bit more by ear, but we'll see what we find and take things from there. Thanks. We are back, and I was doing a quick perusal of the goings on in the Bigfoot space of social media, and much to my surprise, it's a little slow. On a social level, you have some beer event in Massachusetts being hosted by the Cobble Mountain Critter Project and a local microbrew. So I forget the exact date of that, but they have some things like that coming up, and they have some festival coming up in June that I might actually try to get to. Since I don't really go out of my way to go to conferences, but this isn't really seemingly a conference as much, and it's close enough, and I know enough of the people that for a change of pace, it might break it up a little bit and get me out of the house in a different direction. I also, the more I'm thinking, looking around and not seeing a lot of activity in this stretch, I said that, but I did find like trackway of like potential hoaxing nonsense the other week. So, all things being relative, I don't know. I guess I'm feeling the Vermont itch, so I'm going to probably give thought next week. And I'm throwing this out there in the process of probably self-jinxing as we speak, and I'm going to check the weather app right after I say this, but I'm going to make an effort to get up there and do some scouting because there's a couple of places I can get in. It's still limited until they open gates, and again, with all the government, I hate bringing politics into my freaking videos, but with all the freaking layoffs and cuts and all the nonsense going on with that shit, I don't know how that's going to affect any of that. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. It's really all you can do with that in the meantime, and I'm leaving that right there. I'm not delving into politics. That's not what I do out here. And we're not going to start. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm due to get up there, but then again, weather and snowpack and all that. Although the snowpack up there this year doesn't look nearly as bad as it has in past years. I say that trepidatiously if I come across sounding that way, mainly because I've gone up this time of year thinking it's time to start the season early, roll up your sleeves, and let's get down to work. You get up there and there's still 4 fucking feet of snow on the ground. And you really can't get into any area or do much of anything. And you just kind of have to suck the hard bit of reality on that for a few more weeks. So rather than do that and kind of cut myself off at the knees, I'm going to kind of put my big toe in the water and see where that goes and see what happens. It's also nearing the beginning of fishing season too, so that has some mixed vibes because I do usually in April or so, which is not far. It's around the corner. I do actually take a Saturday off from doing this and go fishing just to break in the season. And then, allergies are starting too, which is fun because I woke up congested this morning. So we'll be doing that as well, but maybe combining activities because I have fished here before for anyone that's wondering, and I either had the wrong bait or didn't catch anything, so not much to say in terms of a fishing report here. better fishing probably, or over the hill and dale and such, there's a boat launching area situation where you probably have better luck. They may or may not stock that. I don't know. Anyway, back to Bigfoot. The Cobble Mountain dudes are basically throwing a festival in the somewhere in early June, and I'll truck up there to see what's going on with that. So if anyone wants to show up and show the Vogel brothers some love and adoration, or just kind of hang out and talk Bigfoot shop for the sake of the day, it breaks it up. And frankly, I probably could use a rekindling of that kind of thing to get me motivated. Also, so I have, last year I talked a good game of building a couple of cyber decks for field research, and they are built. So now it's not a matter of building them and testing them. It's a matter of getting them in the field and actually feckin' using them on night ops and the like. So that I shall attempt to do that to keep myself involved in the game, and we'll see where we go. I'm going to walk around and look. I was actually encouraged because, as I said, as I was walking in, they were human prints, but you could actually see prints in this kind of crap. So that's encouraging, actually. You kind of have to pay closer attention because it's a lot more subtle than snow, obviously, but it can be done. So we're going to cut through this mountain laurel here and go over yonder and see what we can find over that way. That's the direction the stompers were in. So I'm curious if that was just a one-off thing in the snow, or if you got some dickhead out here trying to fucking play games with stompers or whatnot. So Gish will find out. Other than that, let's see what we do. We'll be back in a bit, and this will be segment break number 1. We're back, and we're still dealing with a lot of this. I was, again, checking Facebook for any kind of banter for the day, since I did kind of want to do a video today, but there's not really a lot that I saw. However, one of the guys who seemingly has a like mind on the subject to my own raised the question today about the 411. Like, how come it gets discussed so much in Bigfoot circles, or why don't we discuss the missing people more? And this, again, leads us into that area of, I'm just going to call it wishful thinking, because, I mean, people want to say that, you know, it's automatically Bigfoot, or UFOs, or if you want to go down the nonsensical freaking Matt Johnson route of portals and Zorthiness and all that bullshit. And yes, it is bullshit. I have actually an update on something from last week too, but let me segue. The fact of the matter is, more times than not, these disappearances are due to exposure or people just getting lost and not being prepared for the conditions. And I can speak from experience. The one time I did get lost, even though it was a fairly minor affair compared to some, I was lost for, I believe, sorry about that. I was lost for probably just under 2 hours. And I wasn't in I was in an area larger than this, but not so large I was going to be out there and lost for days. I mean, it's one of those things where you got turned around in a semi-familiar area. And also walking to, I saw that one last week. Never mind. That's a rerun. So this is right where the area was where the stompers were, I think, in this area. But as you can see, snow is gone. So, and you're like, how are you sure? Well, there's a landmark, that big burl over there. Anyway, speaking from my own experience of getting lost, it can happen to the best of us. And in my case, I can conjecture anyone and everyone else that's had something like this happen. But this is the one I can relate to and say, this is what happened to me. I was in an area I was relatively familiar with. And I had hiked the area dozens of times before. And again, I don't think it was actually truly life or death at any point in time. I think I might have been playing on the edges of hypothermia, but that being said, I had already called for help. I had enough common sense and enough humility to, suck it up and ask for help rather than sit out there and have a miserable afternoon freezing my ass off. Because I don't think the conditions were not necessarily going to kill me as far as being out there overnight, because I don't think I was going to be out there overnight. If I walked in any given direction long enough in a relatively straight line, I was going to pop out in an area that I was at least semi-familiar with, deduce my surroundings, and then have a long kick myself in the ass for being stupid walk back to the car and be out there for a few hours longer than I thought I was, which is still not great, but it's a learning tool if you use it as one. What I did wrong was I brought equipment to be out in the cold better than I was. But I had gone out with a mindset of just getting out of the house for the day, and honestly didn't think I was going to be hiking for more than 30, 40 minutes. And then I saw moose tracks and decided, let's see where these go. And then I got turned around. 40 minutes turned into 3.5 hours or so getting stuck and then trying to backtrack and figure out where the bleep I was, which I did eventually do, but it also put me in a place where it was going to be a good 1.5 hour walk back to the car. I had actually bumblefucked my way down a steep little foothill. I'm not going to call it a mountain, although when you're going down it, it sure as hell looks that way in your mind. But what was killing me was I was not dressed for the weather, and this is where I think 411 has a lot of shit happen like this. It was a slow, easy to overlook drizzle in 36 degrees, which is cold, but if you're moving, not as cold as you might think initially. Keyword, initially. Had I had my coat on that I had with me, that's ducked down. That takes forever and a day to soak through, and I honestly would have been fine. Of course, I didn't do that because I was stupid. And I freely admit I was stupid because I knew the area. And what do I need that for? Because I know better. Well, now I know that I don't. But anyway, you get to a point where you realize the clusterfuck of the mistakes that you make based on familiarity breeding contempt. Mistake number one, didn't dress for the conditions. That slow drizzle got through my fleece, this fleece. But I also discovered that this fleece is made out of some kind of space agey shit that when it does get soaking wet, it doesn't lose the heat. You stay warm. So that was a positive thing. I actually got a chance to test this shit in extreme conditions. And you're not going to freeze to death because the material fails. You're going to freeze to death because it's still that cold and you're soaking wet everywhere else, but that's another matter. I can't blame it on the fleece because that actually never really got that cold. Mistake number two, every so often go through your backpack and remember the shit that you have in it, because the backpack I had on at the time, I had a survival kit with a little shitty $5 compass in it, and that $5 compass didn't bleeping work. I got home, and sure enough, I had the good compass on me the entire time. That would have saved me a shitload of grief, I think. But you can't kick yourself in the ass beyond the point. Once you're home and you learn your lesson, just learn your lesson and move on. But and the third lesson was just being like, oh, this is fine. I've been here a million. Don't do that. Assume you can get lost. I mean, right now I'm in an area I know pretty well. And no, I don't have a backpack on, but then again, I'm not jumping the creek and going way the fuck over that way today because there's not anything over there I need to see. I've scouted that area before, and later in the season when fishing becomes a relevant thing, there is a potential fishing spot way over there. But today, we're not doing that. Today we're just doing a kind of like walk and think in the woods kind of video. Which I've done too many of, which is why I'm itching to get into Vermont also. But you can see because I'm rambling, sort of. But back to my own fuck up. Mistake number one, didn't dress for the weather. Mistake number two, relied on a shitty little compass I had never tested before. And I mean, these things are like, they're between $3 and $5. You can get them at Cabela's. You can get them at Cabela's they're going to be $10 because of the markup. But the point is, these things are a dime a dozen. By the same token, you have these, little $5 freaking thermal poncho or rain poncho things. And I know from personal experience, the $5 ones, if you're walking through woods like this, you're fine, because notice it's thinned out a little bit. But you walk into woods with dense undergrowth, eventually you're going to catch it on something. You're going to find out that is a one-use parka. Your $5 parka is a one-use parka because it's going to tear and rip, and by the time you get out, it's probably not usable again. You buy what you get what you pay for. That's the lesson there. It's simple enough. And again, the third was just being cocky. I know this area. What could go wrong? Well, you walk out into an area like this, and you think you're heading in the direction you think you are, and then because you timed the logging road in from where you are back there, and then you walk that same space, that same time in your head back, and you realize the road ain't there. The road is nowhere in sight. You kind of have to accept the fact you have not gone in the direction you thought you did. So you pull out the compass and you start trying to figure it out. And after you realize your compass doesn't work, you suddenly look around and you notice that every fucking direction looks exactly the same, and you have no idea what direction to proceed in. And in that moment, I draw back reference to a Survivor Man episode where he was doing a simulated search and rescue situation, and he makes the point during there, you have to resist the urge to panic and just start running in a random direction, because that is a very real fucking thing. From personal experience, even if you're in a fairly familiar area and you've only been out there for the brief period of time that I was. And again, my situation was actually very minor compared to some. I will freely admit, it was really not as serious as it could have been. If I had done that in the middle of winter in Vermont, you're fucked. Pardon, I'm not sugarcoating my words today, but the woods out there are large enough in some areas that if you get turned around enough, you can be in there for the weekend. And if the weather this time of year, I mean, okay, up there right now, it may be anywhere from, counting down, it could be anywhere from like the mid 40s all the way down to like 12. And if it's 12 during the day, minus the wind, you get to night, you're going to have a little zero in front of that. Are you dressed for that? Because if not, you're going to die. The elements, the conditions, the exposure will take you. Dying of exposure is a very real thing. And getting back and drawing that into the greater 411 concept I began this rambling little tangent on. This is a broad stroke of the brush. However, I'd be willing to bet you that 80% plus of the missing cases of adults that went out into the woods and never came back, they died of exposure because they were numbnuts and they didn't plan. I am a fairly experienced, notice I say fairly, I don't say I'm an expert because I don't think anyone really ever is, because no one, unless you actively go and do this 24/7, 365 in every fucking kind of conceivable condition out there, desert, Arctic, freaking tropical jungle, all that, you're not an expert. You can be knowledgeable. I consider myself fairly knowledgeable of the areas that I go in. And I listen because I hear the mortal enemy that is the freaking dirt bikers and or the... You got ATVers over there. I have a special dislike of them because they just don't care about the trail system. Can't see them, but I can hear them. They're right over the other side of the trees. Now, 1, 2. All right, there goes one. I found the blind spot in the trees where I can see them. There's like 2 of them. 1, 2. There's a straggler. Lucky for you, it's not hunting season. But, and as much as I dislike people like that, I'm going to say something too, which is, if you're stuck out there and you're having a really bad day like I was just describing, that might be a ride. That might be a ride back to your car. So, know when to pick your battles diplomatically too, I guess. People skills go a long way, and you don't just practice that in the office. They're just going through and tearing everything up. Oh, you're going off. What, you're going off key too? Don't do that. Yeah, they're jumping and tearing all the shit up. And the reason it annoys me is right at the end there normally was a sign that says this is a wildlife management area and you're not supposed to be in here with us, but obviously they don't care. When was it? Last October, I caught a bunch of dirt bikers doing the same thing, and I filmed it. I actually sent that footage to the ranger station. I don't know if they ever did anything with it, but if you are in this area and you're doing shit like that, do understand I will rat you out. But anyway, back to the matter at hand before we were so rudely interrupted. And here's your weird little tree in these eldritch-looking woods. I'd be willing to bet you at least 85% of the cases are people just went out unprepared and died of exposure. So it's kind of silly to go into matters of aliens, portals, Bigfoot. I mean, if Bigfoot was taking people and all that, I'm sorry, you would hear more about it, at least on a folklore level. And you just don't. And when you have Gomers like Paulides, I was going to just leave him out of this, but he does a disservice because he's playing with the details and tantalizing them just a little bit. There's one story I use as the comparison because I know this one well because it's native to the Bennington Triangle. In the latter 40s, I want to say 49, but it could have been earlier. A college girl went out into the woods, and she was admonished by several people on the way there, telling her she was not dressed for conditions. Girl from Connecticut, and she never came back. Never been found. And I've read a few different versions of the story, Paulides and then all the local news ones. And basically, she either walked out there and got turned around and again, exposure took her, or she was murdered by some truck driver guy who gave her a ride or something. He had been fighting with his wife and he was a suspect in her non-proven murder for a while, if I remember right. But Paulides kind of tweaks it. Well, there was a scream of a young woman near this swamp, and all like, no. Yours is the only version that has that little detail, and you're like, well, she was taken by Bigfoot in the swamp. No, she wasn't. And there are big feet in that area. There, I said it. Between 2016 and 2019, I was tracking a mated pair of them. They are there. They've said that individual group has since moved on, but there was another individual that was further north of there that I was tracking inadvertently because he was more subtle. He was a larger one and more subtle, and you can take this for what it is. This is anecdotal, but this happened. And I've seen evidence of him being in the northern part of that stretch of woods off and on. It may still be there, maybe not. They're just tearing the shit up, and that's just... Yes. Anyway. But when you have people like Paulides milking this shit, exploiting this shit for his books, which he is doing. He's doing a disservice. He is basically a grifter, in my opinion. But I've ragged on that before, and rather than get into a shouting match with his fans, because unfortunately you do have dumbasses out there that are fans of his, and you know, if you are, so be it. To each their own. But and in terms of like defense also of knowing an area very well, I walked by this exact spot with that. I'm going to actually put that back because it actually is a landmark. But that was exactly there, and I walked by this exact spot last week because of that. That's memorable. As well as that. But why do we not talk about it more? Why does the government not talk about it more? One thought on that aspect of it would be just the aspects of an actual cycle of an investigation. How often do you hear, like, you have a local criminal investigation going on and the cops will make a comment to the press? We are not going to comment yet because the investigation is, quote unquote, still ongoing. It's standard operating procedure in many of the cases like that. If you still have an open case, they may just... my own theory is the investigators, the authorities don't like to just come out and say, guys, we don't know. Recently in my own town, we had a situation, this is not Bigfoot related, but it was a matter that a person had somehow managed to drive their car into the river. And tantalizingly, the car was found and recovered, and the rear passenger window had been smashed out. So the person did get out of the car. So they know that much. But the person, no body recovered, and the question, they basically said they're not looking for the person anymore. So does that come out to the person got swept away in the river and they're dead, or they had some ulterior motive for getting rid of the car and they basically got out and made it to shore and just decided to look both ways? No one saw them come ashore and they just kind of skedaddled off into the dark. Or anything possibly in between. Makes for an interesting story that way. Did it happen that way? You'll never know. Maybe the cops know and they're looking for a murder suspect and they found something in the trunk. They're not going to tell you that part until the investigation's over. Right now it would still be ongoing, but they're just going to say no, and cops are allowed to lie in case they're looking for a murder suspect and they don't want them to know they're still on their trail. If they were doing something crazy like that, if you want to go all paranoidically conspiracy theory related true crime on that, then they'd be within their rights to do it. Throw the killer off by thinking there's no heat on him, which I just took that in a random direction, but also possible. I was watching a cop show for the first time in years last night. That's why I guess my mind went there. Anyway. That's my thoughts on the 411 thing. It's probably 90% of it is just mundane shit like everything else. My own experience, was I going to die out there? Probably not. Because again, I had... In a different situation, you would have been a lot more in danger, but in my case, I had A, signal on the phone. B, the phone had about a 65% battery percentage on it, so it wasn't going to drop dead in the next 3 seconds. And I had enough sense to call 911 and say, hey, I'm lost out here. Can somebody give me, can you throw me a bone and help me get the bleep out of here? Although in my own defense, I did actually happen upon them at the same time. So it's not the matter that I found them or they found me as much as they and I found each other. And then they were nice enough to give me a ride back to the car and not cast judgment on me. It's like, yes, I fucked up. I admit that I got a little cocky in the nature of my my hike, and then I paid for it. This has probably happened to more people than you realize. And what you do is, it's your humbler. You have to eat some humble pie and realize that you may not know everything you think you do. And therefore, this is also an enemy of mine. You see him right there? We want spring to show up, and these little bastards are in that one little crevice where the sun doesn't get to, and it lingers, and it looks at you, and it taunts you. And when it finally dies, somewhere in mid-May, you have that evil little bit of satisfaction that he's dead. Anyway, sorry. I'm not going to... The whole point of that... The point of it was asked online in the form of a question. How come we never talk about these things? How come it doesn't get more coverage? Probably a combination of things, and probably due to a lot more mundane things than you realize. And unlike the X-Files, I've also seen I'm throwing this in there as an add-on to myself. This person didn't raise this. I'm going to raise it. Some people will ask, well, does the FBI ever get involved in these things? And the answer, honestly, is more often than not, no, they don't, unless there's an actual sense of foul play, because the FBI, some people don't realize, they have a specialized jurisdiction. And if you don't have foul play that involves the crossing of state lines, they're probably not going to get involved, and you're probably not going to get beyond the state police level. Why? Jurisdictions. I think I used this example before, but how that generally breaks down. I had I'm not even gonna call it a fender bender. We had a fender tap a few years ago during the course of going to another work site at work, and in the course of this it happened on the on-ramp to a highway, so it was on a state interstate. And the people around us were brain dead and not realizing we had had an accident, so I had made the suggestion to the woman in the other car that we move, for the sake of our own mutual safety, to an office park around the corner. But that brought us into the town, and the first arriving officer to take our report and check our shit and all that was a town cop, and he listened to what we said, and then basically, okay, well, I got to call on a statey because this actually happened in his jurisdiction. So it actually dragged out normally, you're not supposed to be held at a accident site for more than 20 minutes, but ours dragged out, not because of any malfeasance on the part of the officer or the trooper. It was a matter that I had actually inadvertently complicated the sense of things by moving things to another jurisdiction, so he had to get his guy in. So we kind of duplicated efforts, but that wasn't something that the cops did. I did that. Because there are people out there that love to hate on cops, and even though I'm not always their biggest fan, in this case, in all fairness, no, I actually moved us to get us out of the way because we were actually in harm's way, and I basically wanted to I didn't want my car to get hit. I mean, her car had already been bumped, and she was already being grumpy about it, and I didn't really want to deal with Karen any more than I had to. She was a little bit of a Karen. But in the end, she took my information. She said she was going to have her garage look at it. I never heard from her again, so I guess she realized that there was no damage. The cop and I both looked at it, and we're like, I don't even see a scratch on her bumper, so it was literally just a tap. But regardless, that's an illustration of how you have overlapping jurisdictions and why the FBI probably doesn't get involved in 99% of 411 shit, because unless you have interstate level freaking malfeasance involved, it's just not going to drag them in. Yeah, you have to have some, excuse me, some extraneous aspect to the situation for them to be involved, let alone any other federal agency of a special like. Because that's the thing is that you have to realize that federal agencies have specific. Man, I'm just rambling all over the fucking place today, but federal agencies have different jurisdictions. The FBI has theirs. Then you have Secret Service does. What do? They do like counterfeiting. They protect the president, shit like that. Believe it or not, the IRS has their own investigative wing with guns and badges and shit. So if you're a tax cheat and they want you bad enough, they can come get you too. ATF does tobacco, alcohol, and firearms. And for some reason, all the other agencies seem to hate their guts. I don't know what's up with that, but I've heard that before. National Security Agency is basically the domestic CIA. The CIA are spies, and I'm not going to delve down that rabbit hole. They do spy shit, and we'll leave it at that. And those are the ones I'm aware of. Now, you want to delve into freaking UFO shit? You recently had made, I think they're attached to the Navy, the Aerial Anomaly Resolution Office, aka AARO. And they're the latest government effort to cover up UFO shit. I mean, probably what they do. They make a nice show of like, we're looking into it and all this, and then people get their hopes up, and then they're like, we've looked at all the things and there's no evidence of alien activity. It's all explainable shit except for these 20 cases over here we're not going to talk about. But you know what I mean? Because that's an argument that's been made about Bigfoot stuff too. And it's like, yeah, you have tens of thousands of reports. But if you even have, say, 10 that are not explainable, then you have 10 that are not explainable. Have you ruled out the subject altogether? No. You've made a case that it's exceedingly rare, and that is one thing that I do hold to and get annoyed with when people online want to look out here and say every little tree down here is something Bigfoot did, and fuck you, if they were that common, we wouldn't still be looking, would we? Because that opens up the door for the Matthew Johnson world of freaking supernatural nonsensical bullshit. And I have to do a slight retraction from last week because I did say there's a person in the neighboring group who seemed to be talking about Dr. Matthew Johnson, or I'm not going to call him a doctor because he's a fucking psycho, but, and fuck you, Matt, you're a psycho. What, fuck you, and for any fan of yours, fuck you, you're a psycho, Zorth can suck my left nut. Sorry. But apparently, she was very much into the woo, but even she comes right out and says, yeah, Matt Johnson's full of shit. So there you go. Even the ones that believe in the silly stuff still think that Matt Johnson's shit is too silly for even them. And they're like, nah, we're not doing that. So, she may believe in some shit that I don't, but at least she has some element of standards. I'll give her that much, in fairness. And kind of left it at that. I threw her a friggin' olive branch and said, okay, fair enough. Like, are you going to read this? Because when I was briefly, out of curiosity, went to his group, and there's a whole cult mentality there and they are a cult, don't kid yourself. Like, well, have you read Matthew Johnson's 4 books, and have you seen his video? No, and I'm not going to waste my time on that shit, because it's not like, they try to make it sound like it's going to change your life, and like, no, it's not. It's poorly reproduced and stolen copycat shit from Scientology and other stuff. He stole the whole plant people thing from Michael Merchant. And the thing about Michael Merchant is half the stuff he does is tongue-in-cheek. So, I mean, you don't always know if he's being serious or if he's pulling your leg or not. Which is part of, like, why I have been out in the woods with him and Lady K, and that's half of why it's fun to hang out with him. They do kind of make the outing interesting. And in case you're ever wondering, just on a candid moment, have I gone out in the woods with woo people? Yeah, I have. And the thing of the matter is, we both go out into the woods in that notion with an honest understanding that we both don't see the subject with the same focus, but that's okay. A person can still be a nice person and still see things in a way that I don't, and okay. But the mature people in the community can also agree to disagree. That's kind of where I take that. Anyway, that being said, I have covered more than I thought I would. I belched. We came, we saw, we belched, we conquered. Got pissed off at ATVers who were probably tearing up Connecticut trails from the Massachusetts side. Because across the state line over that way, there is actually a set of private property-related ATV trails, but they don't stay there. And they don't care, and that's why they can go merrily screw themselves. Anyway, what I'm edging towards is, unless something dramatically crazy happens, I think that's all I have for today. Gonna kind of like wind through here and look for any sense of indents like I found on the way in, although I'm pretty sure those are just boot prints. But we'll look for those, kind of loop around doing that and do some actual field work and be done yapping on the camera. And on the assumption nothing else is going to happen, like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff if you're so moved, and we'll catch you on the next one. And rather than ramble on, bye.